Good morning. I'm Sonya Bergeron. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a ministerial candidate with the Unitarian Universalist Association, and I also work as a hospice chaplain. I'd like to welcome you all here this morning, those in our pews and those on Zoom. So join me in waving to those that are meeting with us via Zoom. So I received my Master of Divinity from Naropa University, which is a Buddhist-inspired university, and I'm currently taking classes at Star King School for Ministry, which is a UU seminary. And I wanted to bring a couple of the key ideas from that class to share with you today. As many of you know, UUs value the wisdom of many traditions. But we are not those traditions as an organization or even as individuals. Our key values are theological openness and the commitment to the hard work of building beloved community. Theological openness means that we are not only open to others' understandings, we are also open to letting our understandings evolve. This concept is easy to see in the scientific world, where new discoveries change how we see our place in the world. UUs strive to be open, having open hearts and open mind. We are not taught to hold on to our faith. These are words that I heard in a conservative Christian retreat when I was a young adult. But as UUs, we are taught that our understandings will evolve. Both Unitarian and Universalist religions started off as Christian religions. They originally had different emphasis in their liberal Christian understandings. Unitarians believed in one God and the divinity of humankind. Universalists believed that God was such a loving God that all his human creation would go to heaven, universalist salvation. Both of these liberal Christian understandings were pretty radical in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Both denominations had disagreements with those who were open to change, but both Unitarians and Universalists eventually embraced that there were many ways to understand the ultimate, the divine, the unknowable. In 1961, they merged into a single denomination. We are here today at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, knowing that we do not have the same beliefs as those who are sitting in the pews with us. Maybe we can also reflect and see that our own understandings have evolved over our lifetime. Our theological openness is a radical thought compared to many other traditions, even those traditions that we value for the wisdom teachings. The second key value in UU theology is our commitment to the hard work of building beloved community. At All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, we encourage every member and friend to embrace our covenant of beloved community as an essential part of the faith journey. All Souls is a welcoming place where those in the community respect themselves and others. We are a shelter of many beliefs where minority and opposing views are accepted and respected. We maintain our dignity and integrity by taking responsibility for our actions. All Souls is a place where we listen openly to the ideas of others. We actively listen for the meaning and feelings of others' words so that we may better understand their message. We affirm the inherent worth and dignity of others and bring the intentions of kindness and respect to our spoken words. We are mindful of what we say and how our words may be interpreted. We are accepting of others' views, and while we may disagree, we do not challenge the worth of the person behind those views. We fulfill our commitments to the community and to each other. We give generously of ourselves within our means, and we are grateful that others do too. We come here to learn the skills of loving kindness, to practice what we've learned in our community. Our commitment to the hard work of building beloved community in our church and in our larger community is another radical thought, one that is so needed in our world today. Today, we are here to learn and to be together. We are here today because we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we found that sharing, growing, questioning together is an answer.
So initially, I wondered how I might be able to add some levity to this somber topic. I did my best Winnie the Pooh impression, and then I realized that my wish simply perpetuates the problem in this area. It furthers that toxic positivity that we all kind of seek. And in that moment, I was reminded of the 1973 book, The Denial of Death, by anthropologist Ernest Becker. He presents a persuasive case for what happens when we continue to avoid the difficult truths of life. So yes, if I were to encounter a genie, one wish that I'd ask for might involve asking to avoid experiencing illness, injury, and death in my life. Let's face it, it's not fun to talk about the potential of sustaining a serious, incapacitating illness or injury. It's not fun to talk about end-of-life issues. It's not fun, but the experiences are quite likely in terms of that illness or injury, and of course inevitable when it comes to death. And the conversations are so incredibly important to have. Not only is discussing such matters not fun, but our society reinforces our avoidance in all kinds of ways. See that thought above about wanting to add levity. Now, though, the process is easy and simple, involving this 5 wishes document, which I'm guessing Sonya will discuss in more detail. It's taken some doing and some time, but now my dad and stepmom, as well as my mother-in-law, do have documents drafted. My mom did as well. They were all different versions, all different visions of making their wishes known. It's easy to think of this kind of planning being limited to the older generation. When we're young, we tend to be pretty dismissive of this stuff, and that's a shame. Planning for future transitions of any kind is one of the most responsible, loving, and relationship-honoring gifts we can give. Of course, with my mom, the emergence of her dementia and the ensuing court proceedings distorted all of that, but having access to those documents was instrumental in making care and end-of-life decisions that were in keeping with her wishes. So now, I think of this process as being kind of like an existential genie, offering 5 wishes, 5 realistic and meaningful wishes, instead of wishing for levity. I thought I was finished, but I wasn't. So this whole planning ahead process, if there were a 6th wish, it would be that we engaged in much the same kind of thinking and planning for our church. Of course, that's part of what the pledge drive already does, but now you have the opportunity to engage in that process in an ongoing way. Options for giving are on the title slide on the screens above me, and they're also being posted in the chat on Zoom.
So during my work as a chaplain, I've witnessed so many different ways that people face or do not face that death is a part of living. Too many people do not talk about or make plans for death and dying because of fear. Fear is a common response when thinking about or talking about death, especially when reflecting about our own death. So, if you are experiencing a sense of fear right now, I ask that you try not to stuff it or shove it aside. I ask that you be compassionately curious to that emotion, giving it some attention. Maybe you'll notice that the fear won't stay around too long when giving it compassionate attention. Fear is an emotion, and like all emotions, fear is temporary. The Buddhist practice is to make friends with the difficult emotions instead of letting them take us on a wild ride. I've been taught that when we try to keep difficult emotions away, it's like running water that has power. It's hitting us with such force that we're afraid that it's going to knock us over. But if we give attention to those difficult emotions, bringing those difficult emotions front and center, it doesn't have the power that we thought it had. It's not even something that we can hang on to. So I invite you to take in a deep breath right now. Maybe close your eyes. Bring attention to your body, to your mind, and notice what shows up. Is there any emotion that is trying to get your attention? If so, I invite you to name that emotion, pay attention, and bring compassion to it and to yourself. So let us take just a couple of deep breaths. And I invite you to do this throughout my talk today. Periodically check in with yourself. Take in a deep breath. Notice what's demanding your attention and hold it with compassion. Because of my work in the hospital and with hospice, I became interested in the Conversation Project. The Conversation Project is a public engagement initiative that is both simple and transformative. To have every person's wishes for end-of-life care expressed and respected. Too many people die in a manner they would not choose, and too many of their loved ones are left feeling guilty, bereaved, uncertain. The Conversation Project believes it's time to transform our culture so we shift from not talking about dying to absolutely talking about it. It is time to share the way that we want to live at the end of our lives. And it's time to communicate about the kind of care and treatment we want or don't want for ourselves. The belief is the place for this conversation to begin is at the kitchen table or in the living room, and I will add, in the church. It's not to be initiated in the intensive care unit or the emergency department. We must talk with the people we love before we can't, before it's too late. Accepting for ourselves that living means dying is difficult. As a society, we deny that death is a reality of life. In an article from the Journal of Religion, Spirituality, and Aging, which is titled This Mortal Life, Aging and Spirituality After the Great Transition, the author Stephen Picard describes this great transition as the emergence of a substantially increased lifespan over the past 150 years and a corresponding increased birth survival. With the increased lifespan and birth survival, there's become a societal denial of death. Studies performed by the Conversation Project suggest that when people have conversations about death before they are close to end of life, they experience less guilt and depression after the loss of a loved one. In being honest and realistic and talking about the end, we can become more alive in the present, more aware of the fragility of life, and more appreciative of the people and things that make us happy. The ability to recognize the reality of death can ultimately bring us more happiness and more fulfillment in life. Recognizing the reality of death is a part that death is a part of living is a key Buddhist teaching. Judith Leaf is a teacher of Buddhist psychology and meditation, and she trained under Naropa's founder, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Judith is active in the field of death and dying, and she wrote the book, Making Friends with Death, a Buddhist guide to encountering mortality. In this book, she writes, "Death is a fact we all face. We can't buy our way out. No matter how often we go to the gym, work out, no matter how pure our living or healthy our diet, we cannot avoid it. It comes to everyone, rich and poor, sane and crazy, good and evil. One by one, it strikes us. We all go through that same narrow gate called death." During my studies at Naropa, I spent time contemplating death. Through my studies, my personal experience, and my professional life, I've leaned into talking about dying, and I've leaned into reflecting on my own death. I've come to see and accept that death is a common human experience. My questioning of the mystery of death has evolved into a deep gratitude for the mystery of life. Still, it is difficult to talk about death with loved ones. It's a topic frequently avoided in society today. It's discussed in hushed voices, far away from children who might be considered too young to understand. In fact, many of us are taught from a young age to think that death is scary, and so we're afraid to talk about it, even as adults. Even though talking about loss is challenging, it can be viewed as an opportunity to construct a more positive end-of-life experience when that time arrives. Having difficult conversations about death earlier in life can free us to focus more of attention on the holiness of dying and the lived lives of the deceased. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel understood the importance of this idea, saying, "In the presence of death, there is only silence and a sense of awe." This sense of awe is likely not going to be present if we haven't done the work to accept that living means dying, and if we haven't thoughtfully considered how we want to approach our last days or the last days of our loved ones. Medical technology complicates. It's become a two-edged sword. It can extend life, and it can also prolong suffering. In truth, considering how we die is a luxury afforded to us by modern times. For most of human history, death came suddenly, or if not suddenly, at least relatively quickly. Whether afflicted by terminal illness or catastrophic accident, once death was imminent, it came quickly. People did not linger for weeks, months, or years as they do now. But today, medicine can replicate most of the major organ functions. A heart pump can circulate your blood, a ventilator can breathe for you, a feeding tube can provide nutrition, dialysis replaces your kidney function. In some cases, medical treatment creates the time needed for the body to do its healing magic. In other cases, time makes clear just where things are headed. What is often the case, unfortunately, is that patients are incapacitated and they're not able to make their own decisions. And many times, family members really don't have a clue how their loved ones would like to be cared for. What's more, often patients and members of their families haven't internalized the simple biological truth that we are all mortal. In fact, I've met many patients and families who don't believe in death. It's true. Atul Gawande wrote the book Be Immortal, and his PBS Frontline documentary Be Immortal can be viewed on YouTube. He writes, "Be Immortal is about the struggle to cope with the constraints of our biology, with the limits set by genes and cells and flesh and blood. Medical science has given us remarkable power to push against those limits, but I've seen the damage we in medicine do when we fail to acknowledge that such power is finite and always will be. Doctors usually have one more thing that they can try, and Jessica Zitter calls this the end-of-life conveyor belt. Dr. Zitter is a palliative care doctor who wrote the book Extreme Measures, and she's in the next Netflix documentary, Extremis. She states that the end-of-life conveyor belt is fast-moving and it's hard not to get carried away on it. She shared that doctors keep offering new options because it makes them feel more caring, more kind, and they'll do that even when they don't really think it will help. Dr. Zitter also notes that each person's preferences are unique, as they should be. For one person, living attached to machines would never be acceptable, while another would prefer that to death. For one person, anything less than full emotional and cognitive functioning is not acceptable, while for another, it might be okay to live without those faculties if they're still able to enjoy the company of their family. There's no right or wrong. It's a very personal matter. That is why it is so important to think about these issues and then inform your loved ones and your healthcare team what you want. That will go a long way in eliminating second-guessing and guilt for those who have to make decisions for you when you can't. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ellen Goodman describes the time she was faced with a question about medical treatment for her mother and how she experienced second-guessing and guilt. She states, at the end of her life, my mother could not even decide what she wanted for lunch, let alone what health care she wanted. So when I got the call from the nursing home doctor saying Mom had another bout of pneumonia, and do I want her to have antibiotics? I thought, what is he asking me? Do I want her to live or die? I was so blindsided. Ellen struggled and questioned the decision she was making on her mother's behalf. She knew she had missed the opportunity to have a conversation with her mother. She says, I realized only after my mother's death how much easier it would have been if I had heard her voice in my ear as those decisions had to be made. It was too late to have that conversation with her mother. So Ellen Goodman did something for the rest of us. She founded the Conversation Project. I'll share a few of the questions that are listed in the Conversation Project Starter Kit, and I'll pause for a breath or two after each question to give you space to reflect on your personal response. First question is, who do you want or do not want to be involved in your care? Who would you like to make decisions on your behalf if you're not able to? When you think about the last phase of your life, what's most important to you? Do you have any particular concerns about your health, about the last phase of your life? Are there kinds of treatment you want or do not want? Having the conversation is the important first step. Following the conversation, you can make sure your wishes are clearly stated and respected when the time comes by completing important advance directives. Every state has its own advance directive forms, and I'll tell you what I've learned about 3 of Colorado's documents: the medical durable power of attorney, the living will, and the medical orders for scope of treatment. A medical durable power of attorney is a simple document where you name your health care agent if you cannot make decisions for yourself. It is applicable beyond a single procedure or hospital stay. You keep the original and you give copies to doctors and hospitals. Sometimes people think they've completed this document because some paperwork that was filled out prior to a procedure. Often, those forms only apply to that incident. Most of our 50 states are next of kin states, in that if a person is determined not to have mental capacity to make their own healthcare decisions, then their next of kin is automatically the patient's healthcare agent if there's no overriding documentation in place. But Colorado is not a next of kin state. If a medical durable power of attorney does not exist, then the doctor or his representative completes a proxy coordination process. I've done that many times in the hospital on behalf of the doctor. For this process, families, friends, roommates need to come to a consensus on who will serve as the patient's healthcare agent. And it's not usually contentious, but you can imagine sometimes it is. It can be an additional stressor for the family who's already going through a lot with their loved one being so ill. If the proxy coordination process is needed, it is a group who decides who will represent the patient's wishes. That patient may not have decided or may not have wanted that one person to be making those decisions. And that's why we encourage everyone to have a medical durable power of attorney. And in Colorado, it's very easy. It only requires an initial and a signature. It does not require witnesses or a notary. And I do want to say a little bit about the healthcare agent. The healthcare agent is to make decisions that the patient would want, not decisions that the healthcare agent wants for the patient. Sometimes that gets a little tricky for them. So it's important to choose a healthcare agent you trust that will carry out your wishes, and they need to know your wishes. The living will is where a person writes down about their wishes about medical treatment they would want at the end of life, and it tells your doctors and your healthcare agent when to stop or start sustaining treatments if you can no longer speak for yourself. In Colorado, a living will only go into effect 48 hours after 2 doctors certify that you are either in a terminal condition or a persistent vegetative state. The living will needs to be signed in the presence of 2 witnesses who also sign the document. The witnesses are acknowledging that the person signing the living will appears to be sound of mind, is not under duress or undue influence. It's important that your MDPOA, your medical durable power of attorney, and your living will are not locked away in the safe where only a couple of people or maybe no one can get to. Make copies for your family and your close friends. You can email them the documentation and they can have it on their phone. I also encourage you to bring it to the hospital or to your doctor, and they can make a copy of it and give you back the original. And finally, the medical orders for scope of treatment is a physician order. It's filled out after a conversation with your doctor and reflects your wishes for medical treatment. It legally obligates any first medical responder, such as an EMT, paramedic, or ER physician, to carry out your decisions. In Colorado, it's usually printed on bright green paper, and people are encouraged to display it on the refrigerator. EMTs are trained to look for this form on the refrigerator whenever they're called in for an emergency. And Justin already brought up the 5 wishes. The 5 wishes includes the medical durable power of attorney and the living will. Those are the first 2 wishes in this document. The 5 wishes include the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't, the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. Wish number 3 is how comfortable I want to be. Number 4 is how I want people to treat me. And number 5 is what I want my loved ones to know. Because the 5 wishes includes a living will, it requires the signature of 2 witnesses. Many members in our SAGES group have already been looking at this document and filling it out for themselves. We're going to have a 5 Wishes workshop this coming Saturday on April 13th here at All Souls. But if you can't make it, or if you don't want to do this on your own, you can reach out to me. We can get together either as a group or as individuals. Doing advanced directives is probably not a one-time conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. It's an ongoing reflection. So I invite you to do that work. Take that time. Taking a deep breath right now. Bring attention to your body, to your mind. Notice what is showing up. Is there any emotion trying to get your attention? I invite you to name it. Pay attention and bring compassion to it, to yourself, and to yourself. It is my hope that you understand the importance of planning for death, even when it seems far off. And it is my hope that you begin to have these difficult conversations with your loved ones. I encourage you all to lean into the work that needs to be done. Any day can be an opportunity to talk about the values that guide the way you live, and when the time comes, the way you want to die. These conversations are best done at the kitchen table, not the operating table. We are all mortals. Yet as a society, we've been painfully slow in recognizing how many people we love are not dying in the way they would choose, in a comfort among people who care about them and engaged in what matters most for as long as possible. Saying goodbye to all we know and love is not easy. Preparing to say goodbye may bring us less stress, to our loved ones. And knowing that we have to say goodbye, we may find life to be more precious and more beautiful. Our benediction to today are the words of Kate Walker. As we bring this time to a close, we recognize that each moment leads to a new experience. With the passage of time, we stretch ourselves to remember the past, to live in the present, and to anticipate the future. This time we hold is gone with a breath. We cannot hold that breath, nor can we fully anticipate the next. We are always letting go and greeting the new.